She was humiliated for sheltering a homeless man. But the future held a surprise. Sarah Miller still tasted the bitterness of her dismissal when she found that man collapsed on the sidewalk in front of her building. After 15 years dedicated to St. Jude's Medical Center, she had been let go without any convincing explanation, just with the excuse of cost-cutting. The man was unconscious, with worn-out clothes and an unkempt beard, but when he opened his eyes, something in that gaze touched her deeply. It wasn't just despair, there was a dignity there that she recognized immediately. "Are you okay?" she asked, crouching beside him. He tried to get up, staggering slightly. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean to be a bother. I'll be on my way." "Wait. Do you need medical help?" No. I just need a place to rest for a bit." Sarah looked around. It was almost 9 at night, and it was starting to rain. Without a second thought, she offered her hand. "Come on. You can stay in my apartment tonight." "You don't know me. It could be dangerous. I worked 15 years caring for people. I know how to recognize someone who needs help." The man hesitated, but the rain grew heavier. He accepted the outstretched hand. "My name is David Taylor." "Sarah, let's go up before the rain gets worse." In the elevator, she noticed he maintained an upright posture despite his disheveled appearance. His hands, though dirty, had long, careful fingers like someone used to delicate work. Her apartment on the 5th floor was simple but cozy. Sarah prepared a hot bath and set aside some clothes that had belonged to her father. "Please use them. I'll make something for us to eat." While David washed up, she rummaged through the nearly empty fridge. With her savings running low after the layoff, she only had basic ingredients. She prepared a simple pasta with marinara. When he came out of the bathroom, transformed and in clean clothes, Sarah was surprised. David appeared to be about 55, with well-groomed grey hair after the bath, and an expression mixing gratitude with embarrassment. "Thank you very much, Miss Sarah. It's been a long time since I felt human. Everyone deserves dignity. Sit down. Let's have dinner." During the meal, she noticed he ate slowly, savoring each bite as if it were a gift. His table manners were polite, almost refined. "May I ask what happened to you?" David lowered his eyes. "It's a long story. I lost everything a few years ago. Job, home, family. Sometimes life pushes us to places we never imagined." "I understand. I just lost my job too. After 15 years caring for people, I was let go as if I were worthless." They looked at each other with mutual understanding. Both knew what it was like to have life turned upside down. "You're a nurse?" "I was. Now I'm not quite sure what I am." "A kind person." "That I can say." Sarah prepared the living room sofa for him to sleep, but she had barely fallen asleep when she heard insistent knocking at the door. It was almost 11 at night. "Sarah, open this door right now." It was the voice of Richard Harrison, the building manager, an arrogant businessman who had always unsuccessfully pursued her, especially after she was widowed 3 years prior. She opened the door just a crack. "Richard, what are you doing here at this hour?" "The residents called me. They said you brought a bum into the building. This is unacceptable." "He's not a bum. He's a person who needs help." "Sarah, have you lost your mind? You're putting the whole building at risk." David appeared in the living room, still wearing the borrowed clothes. "I can leave if I'm causing trouble." "No!" Sarah was firm. "You stay. Richard, please leave. It's almost midnight. This isn't over. I'm calling an emergency meeting tomorrow. The other residents will find out about everything." And she slammed the door hard. David shook his head. "I should leave. I don't want to cause problems for you, Mom." "Call me Sarah, and you are not leaving. I'm tired of people like Richard thinking they can control other people's lives." The next morning, notices were posted in all the elevators calling for an emergency meeting at 7 in the evening. The subject, irregular situation in apartment 505. Sarah spent the day nervous. David tried several times to leave, but she insisted he stay. "Do you have any specific skills? A profession?" "I worked many years in construction," Renovations, that sort of thing. She noticed he hesitated in his answer but didn't press him. During the afternoon, David helped fix a faucet that had been dripping for months. His hands worked with impressive precision, as if he knew every detail of the mechanism. Where did you learn to do that? In life. You learn a little bit of everything when you have to. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. At 7 in the evening, almost all the residents were gathered in the building's party hall. Sarah went down with David, who insisted on accompanying her, despite her suggestion that he stay in the apartment. Richard presided over the table with an air of superiority. Next to him were Gladys Walker, a 60-year-old woman who always gossiped about other people's lives, and Bill Davis, a retired accountant who agreed with everything Richard said. Everyone, we are here to discuss a serious situation. Our neighbor Sarah has brought a person of dubious background into the building. He has a name. It's David, Sarah interrupted. Sarah, you are a good person, but you're being naive. We know nothing about this man. He could be dangerous, he could have addictions, he could attract others like him. Mrs. Beatrice Sullivan, a 70-year-old lady who lived on the second floor, raised her hand. Excuse me, Richard. I saw the young man this morning helping Sarah with the groceries. He seemed polite. Mrs. Beatrice, you are very kind, but appearances can be deceiving. We can't take risks. Gladys spoke up. I saw him in the elevator today. He looked like he hadn't showered in days. What if he brings diseases? What if he's a thief? Sarah felt her blood boil. Gladys, you are talking about someone who is present here. A little respect, please. Respect? Sarah, you are the one who needs to respect your neighbor's safety. David, who had remained silent, stood up. May I speak? The hall fell silent. I understand your concern. I know how I look, and I know my presence causes discomfort. It was not my intention to create problems for Sarah, who was the only person in a long time to treat me with dignity. His voice was calm, polite, articulate. Some residents exchanged surprised glances. But you are judging both me and her without knowing our story. Sarah lost her job and yet she didn't hesitate to help someone in need. That says a lot about her character. Richard slammed his hand on the table. A very nice speech, but that doesn't change the fact that you don't live here and are causing disturbances. What disturbances exactly? David asked serenely. You are, Richard stammered. May I ask a question? Did you know that the building's hot water system has a leak in the 6th floor piping that's causing water damage in apartment 608? Everyone turned to look at Mrs. Martha, who lived in 608. It's true. There's a stain on my bedroom ceiling that keeps growing. How do you know that? Richard asked suspiciously. I spent the day observing the building. I have experience in construction. The piping has been faulty for at least 6 months. Mrs. Martha got worked up. 6 months. I've been complaining about this issue for 6 months, and you always say you'll fix it. Richard turned red. That has nothing to do with the meeting's topic. Maybe it does, said Mr. George, a retiree from the 3rd floor. If the young man knows about construction, maybe he could help us with the problems the building manager hasn't solved. You're losing focus, Richard practically shouted. We didn't come here to discuss renovations. We came to resolve the issue of the intruder. Intruder? Sarah stood up. He is my guest. In my apartment. Since when do you all decide who can visit whom? When that visit poses a risk to all of us. What risk? He helped Mrs. Beatrice with her groceries, identified a problem you've ignored for months, and has behaved with more politeness than half the people in this room. The discussion heated up. Voices overlapped in heated arguments. Some defended Sarah, others supported Richard. Finally, Richard banged the gavel on the table. Let's vote. Who is in favor of this person staying in the building? 5 hands went up. Sarah, Mrs. Beatrice, Mr. George, Mrs. Martha, and Frank, the night doorman. And who is against? 9 hands were raised. There, it's decided. Sarah, you have 1 week to resolve this situation, and if you don't, we will call a new meeting to discuss your own residency in the building. Sarah was shocked. You can't kick me out of my own apartment. Yes, I can, if you continue to endanger the safety and well-being of the other residents. David touched Sarah's arm. "It's okay. I'll leave." "No, you will not leave." But he was already heading for the door. In the apartment, Sarah exploded. "This is absurd. How can they be so cruel?" David was packing his few belongings. "Sarah, you've already done too much for me. I can't let you lose your home because of me." "My father went through this." David stopped folding the clothes. "Your father?" "He was fired at 55, a company he helped build for 20 years. He got depressed, started drinking. One day he left home and only came back 3 months later, thin, bearded, looking like a—" She stopped. "Looking like me." "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "No need to apologize, it's true." Sarah sat on the sofa. "When he came back, my mother didn't recognize him. Literally. She thought he was a stranger trying to get into the house. He had to show documents to prove who he was." "And what happened after?" "He recovered. It took time, but he managed. He opened a small woodworking shop and lived happily until he passed 5 years ago. But he always told me that what hurt the most wasn't losing his job or going through hardships. It was losing his dignity. It was being treated as if he were no longer human." David sat down beside her. "Down. I understand your father. That's why you're not leaving. You'll stay here as long as you need, and if they want to kick me out, let them try. I won't abandon someone the way they abandoned my father." During the night, Sarah heard David tossing and turning restlessly on the sofa. He murmured names softly. "Megan, Toby, forgive me." The next morning, she found him in the kitchen, already dressed, holding a cup of coffee. "Did you sleep badly?" "I have nightmares sometimes. Things from the past." "Do you want to talk about it?" "No, not yet." Sarah noticed he was drawing something on a napkin. They were precise lines, forming what looked like the blueprint of a building. "You draw?" David quickly crumpled the napkin. "It's just a silly habit." "Can I see?" "No, it's nothing important." But she had already seen enough. That drawing had technical precision, complex architectural details. It wasn't the work of an amateur. During the day, small acts of vandalism began to appear on the apartment door. Someone had spray-painted "Danger" in red. When Sarah went down to work in the building's garden, a hobby she kept to distract herself, she found trash deliberately scattered in front of the building entrance. "This is ridiculous," she murmured, starting to gather the debris. David appeared beside her. "Let me do that." "You don't have to. I can manage." "Sarah, please, let me help. It's the least I can do." As they cleaned together, Mrs. Beatrice came down to walk her dog. "This is outrageous, Sarah. I know it was Richard's people who made this mess." "How do you know?" "Because I saw Bill throwing some papers here last night. I thought it was regular trash, but now I see it was on purpose." David stopped sweeping. "They're trying to pressure you." "And they're succeeding," Sarah sighed. "Don't worry, dear," Mrs. Beatrice said. "Me and a few others are on your side. We'll talk to more people." That afternoon, Sarah's doorbell rang incessantly. Every time she opened the door, there was no one there. The third time, David went to answer. "Who's there?" he asked loudly. Silence. But he quickly opened the door and caught a boy of about 10 running down the hallway. "Hey, come here!" The boy stopped, frightened. "Who told you to ring the bell?" The building manager. Said he'd give me $5 if I kept ringing it." David took $10 from his pocket. "Here you go. Now go home and don't do that again, okay?" The boy took the money and ran off. Sarah watched the scene from the doorway. "Where did you get that money?" "Oh, I had it saved." Once again, she noticed he hesitated in his answer. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. That night, when Sarah returned from a frustrating job interview, she found David fixing the door lock. "What happened?" "Someone tried to force it. I managed to fix it, but I'll reinforce the bolt." "My God, this is getting serious." "Sarah, I really think you should leave." "No, I won't give in to intimidation." "But if they're trying to break into your apartment, then let's go to the police." "No," he said quickly. "No, the police won't help. It's their word against ours." She found his reaction strange but didn't comment. The next morning, Richard appeared at the door accompanied by 2 private security guards. "Sarah, I'm here to officially announce that from now on we'll have enhanced security in the building. These gentlemen will control the entry and exit of all people. You can't do that without approval from the residents' meeting. It's already approved. Emergency meeting last night. You didn't attend, so you lost the right to have a say." "What meeting? I didn't receive any notice." "The notice was placed under your door. If you didn't get it, that's not my problem." David appeared behind Sarah. "What exactly is the protocol for these guards?" One of the men, a burly fellow about 40 years old, answered, "No one enters or leaves without authorization from the building manager." "And who decides who gets authorization?" "I decide," Richard said arrogantly. "And you are forbidden from leaving and returning." "What do you mean?" "If you leave, you don't come back. Simple." Sarah was furious. "This is false imprisonment. This is protection for the residents. He can leave whenever he wants, but he doesn't come back." "And if I leave with him? Then you don't come back either. You've lost your mind, Richard. I'm protecting my asset. This building is worth a lot of money, and I won't let it depreciate because of your whims." David stepped closer to Richard. "Can I ask a technical question?" "What question?" "Do you have a municipal permit to keep armed guards on residential property?" The 2 guards exchanged glances. "They're not armed," Richard lied. "That man over there has a gun on his hip. I can see the holster." The security guard instinctively put his hand on his weapon. "And you," David turned to the other one, "do you have a permit for that?" "That's none of your business." "It is, because private security guards without legal permits committing unlawful restraint is a federal crime." Richard turned pale. "How do you know that?" "Because I'm not stupid, and you're treading on dangerous ground." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm informing you about the law. Do what you want with the information." Richard signaled to the security guards, and they left without another word. Sarah looked at David, impressed. "How do you know so much about laws?" "Life teaches you a lot." Another evasive answer. She was starting to notice a pattern. During lunch, while eating a simple mac and cheese, Sarah decided to be more direct. "David, can I ask you a personal question?" "Sure." "Did you really only work in construction?" He stopped eating. "Why do you ask?" "You know labor laws. You know technical details about building structures. You know about guns and security. That's not common for someone who only worked in construction." "I worked in a lot of different places." "What kind of places?" "Sarah, please. My past is complicated." "Complicated how?" "I did things, made decisions that cost dearly. For me and for other people." "What kind of decisions?" David got up from the table. "I'd rather not talk about this now." And he went to the balcony. Sarah followed him. "David, I don't care what you did in the past. I care about who you are now." "You don't understand. If you knew the truth, you'd change your mind." "Try telling me, and find out." He stared at the street below for a long time. "I had a company, a big company, hundreds of employees." Sarah felt her heart race. "What kind of company?" "Construction. I was an architect." "An architect?" "Graduated from Columbia University, postgraduate degree in urban planning. I worked on the biggest projects in New York City for 10 years. And what happened? I signed off on a project I knew had problems. The client pressured me, offered a lot of money, and I gave in." Sarah sat down beside him. "What kind of problems?" "Structural. The building wasn't safe, but I signed off anyway. 2 years later, part of the structure gave way during a renovation. And then 3 people were seriously injured. One of them was paralyzed." David began to cry. "My license was revoked. I lost everything in court to pay settlements. My wife left me and took my son. I fell into a deep depression and ended up on the streets." Sarah touched his hand. "How long ago?" 3 years. 3 years since I've seen my son, Toby. 3 years since I've slept a whole night without nightmares." "And Megan, who is Megan?" "She was one of the people who got hurt. a young, smart engineer who was getting married in 2 months. Today she's in a wheelchair because of my greed." They were silent for a few minutes. "Did you try to get professional help?" "With what money? Besides, I deserved to be on the streets. It was my punishment." "David, everyone makes mistakes. What matters is what we do after the mistake." "I destroyed lives, Sarah, and staying on the streets is going to bring those people back to a normal life." "No, but—" "Then why keep punishing yourself? Why not try to redeem yourself by doing good?" He looked at her with red eyes. "How?" "By using your knowledge to help, like you did with Mrs. Martha identifying the leak. I can't practice architecture anymore, but you can use your knowledge in other ways." At that moment, the doorbell rang. It was Mrs. Beatrice carrying a pot. "I brought you some stew. I know you're going through a hard time." "Mrs. Beatrice, you didn't have to—" "Of course I did. You two are the only decent people in this building in a long time." She handed over the pot and whispered, "And be careful with Richard. He's planning something. I heard him talking to some strange men last night." After she left, Sarah and David exchanged worried glances. "What kind of strange men?" "I don't know, but I didn't like the tone of the conversation." That night, they discovered what Mrs. Beatrice had overheard. Someone had put up posters all over the building with David's picture, an old photo from when he was well-dressed and looked prosperous, and the title, "Dangerous Scammer in the Building." The poster said he was an expert at infiltrating condominiums to study routines and then return with accomplices for robberies. "This is slander," Sarah was outraged. "They got that picture from somewhere on the internet, maybe from when I still had the company. Let's tear down all these posters. It's no use, the damage is already done." And it was. The next morning, the few neighbors who still greeted Sarah began to avoid her. In the elevator, people changed floors to avoid riding with them. Mrs. Gladys started spreading stories that objects were disappearing from apartments, stories that were obviously made up but took on a life of their own. "My remote control vanished," she would say to anyone who would listen. "I'm sure it was that man." Mr. Bill began telling people he had seen David peeking through door locks, a blatant lie, since David hardly ever left Sarah's apartment. The pressure increased when a legal notice arrived. Richard had filed an eviction lawsuit against Sarah, claiming she was violating the building's internal regulations. "This is absurd," she told the lawyer she hired with her last savings. "There's no rule about visitors." "Yes, there is," the lawyer, Mr. Bennett, showed her the document. "Right here in the regulations. It is prohibited to host persons not authorized by the building manager for more than 72 hours. But that rule has never been enforced before." "It doesn't matter. It's written, and you've been together for a week." "What now?" "Either you separate or you leave. Legally, there's not much we can do." Sarah left the office devastated. When she got home, she found David in the kitchen packing his bags again. "No, you promised you wouldn't leave." "Sarah, the situation has changed. They have a court order." "Then let's leave together." "Go where? You don't have a job, I have nothing. How will we pay rent?" "We'll manage." "I can't let you lose your home because of me." "My home?" She laughed bitterly. "What home? A place where I'm humiliated every day, where my neighbors treat me like trash. This isn't a home, it's a prison." David stopped folding the clothes. "You have every right to be upset, but you can't make impulsive decisions." "Impulsive?" "David, I lost my job. I'm being harassed by my own neighbors, getting court orders. At what point in my life am I not making impulsive decisions?" They were interrupted by a loud knock at the door. "Sarah, open up. It's an emergency." It was Mrs. Beatrice's voice, very agitated. When they opened the door, she was pale and trembling. "Mrs. Beatrice, what happened?" "I fell down the stairs. My leg, I think I broke it." David reacted immediately. "Where does it hurt exactly?" "Here in my calf. I can't put weight on my foot." "Sarah, get a towel and some ice. Mrs. Beatrice, you need to sit down." He helped her into the apartment and onto the sofa. Then, with precise and careful movements, he examined her leg. "It doesn't seem broken, but it's swelling a lot. It could be a hairline fracture or a serious sprain. You need to go to the hospital." "I have no way to get there." My son lives in Chicago. He's only coming this weekend. We'll take you, Sarah said. But you don't have a car. We'll take a taxi. David, help her down. At the hospital, David stayed by Mrs. Beatrice's side throughout the entire visit. Sarah noticed he was very familiar with medical procedures, asked the doctors the right questions, and understood the technical terms. Do you work in the medical field? The doctor asked. No, but I have experience with emergencies. Another evasive answer. The diagnosis was a fissure in the tibia bone. Mrs. Beatrice needed to have her leg immobilized and use crutches for 6 weeks. How am I going to climb the stairs in the building? She worried. We'll help, David said immediately. You can't. The building manager has forbidden you from being in the building. He can't forbid helping an injured person. On the way back, Mrs. Beatrice shared more details about what she had heard. Richard was talking to 2 men in the parking lot. I couldn't see their faces, but I heard conversations about solving the problem for good. What kind of solution? Sarah asked. I don't know, but one of them said something about an incident and blaming them themselves. David grew tense. Mrs. Beatrice, are you sure about what you heard? Yes, I am, and there's more. Richard was offering money. I heard him say 5,000 if it's resolved by Friday. Friday was 2 days away. When they arrived at the building, a crowd had gathered in the lobby. Richard was addressing the residents as if he were a politician. Everyone, the situation has reached an unacceptable limit. We have a dangerous person living among us, putting our families at risk. What danger? Mr. George asked. The young man hasn't done anything wrong. George, you are so naive. Professional con artists are experts at seeming harmless. But he helped Mrs. Martha with the leak. Exactly. Richard became agitated. He was studying the building structure, mapping our weak points. When Sarah, David, and Mrs. Beatrice entered, supported by the crutches, the whole group turned. Look at that, Gladys pointed. Now he's even accompanying elderly ladies. What a coincidence that Mrs. Beatrice fell right after he arrived. Gladys, Mrs. Beatrice protested. I fell on the stairs in my own apartment. What does that have to do with David? Oh, it does. He could have caused your fall so he could later appear as a hero. David took a step forward. Are you suggesting I intentionally hurt an elderly woman to make myself look good? I'm suggesting you are capable of anything. Gladys, that is a very serious accusation. Do you have any proof? I don't need proof. Your presence here is proof enough of your bad intentions. Sarah couldn't take it anymore. Enough. You're being ridiculous. David saved Mrs. Beatrice's life today. If it weren't for him, she'd be suffering alone in her apartment. Sarah, Richard smiled maliciously. I'm glad you brought that up, because I have a proposal to make. The lobby fell silent. If you kick this man out of your apartment right now, in front of all of us, I'll drop the lawsuit and you can continue living here normally. And if I don't accept, then you leave too. Friday, no extensions. Sarah looked around. Some residents lowered their eyes, embarrassed. Others stared at her expectantly. David, she turned to him, do you accept being thrown out by people who don't even know you? Sarah, it's not worth you losing your home because of me. I'm not losing my home because of you. I'm choosing values more important than 4 walls. And looking directly at Richard, my answer is no. I will not kick out a man who has only helped us since he arrived. And if that means leaving here, then we'll leave. Richard smiled victoriously. Perfect. Friday at 10 in the morning. If you're not out, the police will come to remove you. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. That night, Sarah and David began making plans to leave the apartment. With the little savings they had left, they could maybe afford 2 weeks in a cheap hotel while they looked for a place to live. I have an idea, David said. I know some people who work in renovations. Maybe I can get some odd jobs to help with the rent. People who knew you before? Before all this? No. People I met on the street. We help each other when we can. On Thursday morning, Sarah woke up to the sound of dripping water. It had rained heavily during the night, and several leaks had appeared in the apartment, in the bedroom, the living room, and the kitchen. "This is strange," David said, examining the ceiling. "These leaks are new. They weren't here yesterday. Maybe the rain was just very heavy." "No, look here." He pointed to a stain on the living room ceiling. "This moisture didn't come from above. It came from inside the structure." "What does that mean?" "Someone tampered with the plumbing. These leaks were caused on purpose." Sarah was furious. "They sabotaged my apartment." "It seems so. I'm going downstairs to confront Richard right now." "Wait. If we confront them without proof, they'll deny it, and they might even speed up our eviction." "Then what do we do?" "First, we document everything. Take pictures. Then, I need to examine the pipes." David grabbed a flashlight and went to the bathroom. He removed part of the paneling and spent a few minutes analyzing the pipes. "Sarah, come see this." She approached. "What is it?" "Someone made small holes in the pipes at strategic points. The water is leaking slowly and seeping into the structure." "How do you know they were made on purpose?" "Because the holes are all at the same height and were made with a drill. If it were natural wear, they'd be irregular and at pressure points." "Can you fix it?" "I can, but it will leak again. They can make new holes at any time." "My God, how far will these people go?" During the afternoon, more problems appeared. The electricity started flickering, turning off and on non-stop. The electronic intercom stopped working. The door lock got jammed. "They're sabotaging the apartment's infrastructure," David concluded. "Why?" "To force us out and still blame me for the problems." That evening, Sarah received a call from Mr. Bennett, her lawyer. "Sarah, I have bad news. The building manager got an injunction moving the eviction up to tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock? But you said it was at 10. "It was, but they claimed an imminent risk to the building's safety. Apparently there were several structural problems in your apartment today. Problems they caused themselves. Do you have proof of that?" David examined and... "Sarah, I'm sorry, but the testimony of a homeless person won't carry legal weight against a building manager with a good reputation. He's not homeless, he's an architect." "What do you mean?" "It's a long story, but he understands construction and can prove it was sabotage. Even if you prove it, it's too late now. The injunction is in effect." When she hung up, David was standing by the window watching the street activity. "We have to leave tomorrow at 8, she said. "We're not leaving." "What do you mean?" "Sarah, look down there." She approached the window. 3 men were talking in the parking lot. They were the same ones Mrs. Beatrice had mentioned. "They're planning something for tonight. If we leave now, they'll do something worse and pin the blame on us." "What kind of worse thing?" "I don't know, but we're going to find out." During the early morning hours, they took turns watching from the window. Around 3 a.m., David saw the same men entering the building from the back. "They're going up," he whispered. "Where to?" "I don't know, but I'm going to find out." "David, no, it's dangerous." "Sarah, if they're here in the middle of the night, it's to do something they don't want anyone to see. I have to know what it is." He left the apartment carefully, leaving the door ajar. Sarah stayed by the window, watching. 15 minutes later, he returned pale. "What did you find out?" "They're in Mrs. Martha's apartment." "Doing what?" "Causing more leaks. But not just that. They're damaging the support structure." "What do you mean?" "Sarah, they're sawing through support beams in her apartment. If they keep going, part of the building could collapse." "My God. We have to call the police." "And say what? That we saw men doing renovations?" "But you said it's dangerous." "It is, but we don't have proof. And if we call the police, they'll blame the problems on us and speed up our eviction." "So, what do we do?" David was thoughtful for a few minutes. "I'm going to stop them." "How?" "By confronting them directly." "Are you crazy? There are 3 men." "Sarah, if they cause part of the building to collapse, they could hurt innocent people. Like Mrs. Martha, who doesn't even know what's happening. David, please don't go. Let's just leave here now. And let those people be at risk?" "I can't." "Why? Those people treated us badly. They humiliated us. But they don't deserve to get hurt because of Richard's ambition." Sarah saw the determination in his eyes. "If you're going, I'm going with you." "No, stay here." Both of us or neither. They went up to the 6th floor. The door to Mrs. Martha's apartment was slightly open. From inside came the noises of power tools and low voices. David approached the door and heard the conversation. Cut a bit more of that beam there. When the weight of the accumulated water builds up, it'll give way. And the blame will be on the crazy architect. Obviously. Richard has already spread the word that he's studying the building's structure. When there's a problem, everyone will believe it was his sabotage. What if any witnesses are left? There won't be. The old lady's apartment is right above his. If it falls, it'll take them both down. Sarah froze. They were planning not only to cause a collapse, but to make it look like David was to blame. David signaled for her to go back. But at that moment, Mrs. Martha came out of the elevator carrying grocery bags. "What are you doing here?" she asked, too loudly. The noises inside stopped immediately. The 3 men came out of the apartment. One of them held a power saw, another had a drill, the third carried a toolbox. "Good evening," said the leader, a short, stocky man. "We're doing emergency maintenance." "Maintenance?" Mrs. Martha was confused. "No one told me about any maintenance. The building manager sent us, because of the leaks." "But it's 3 in the morning." "Ma'am, it's better if you go to another apartment tonight for safety." David stepped forward. "What kind of maintenance involves sawing through support beams?" The man with the saw turned threateningly. "What did you say?" "You're compromising the building's structural safety. That's a crime." "And who are you to know that?" "Someone who understands construction." "Ah, the famous homeless architect. Richard told us about you." "If Richard sent you to do this, he's committing a very serious crime." The leader laughed. "A crime? We're fixing leaks." "By cutting support beams?" "What beams? I don't see any cut beams here." David tried to enter the apartment, but the 3 men blocked him. "Mrs. Martha," Sarah addressed the neighbor, "you need to leave your apartment right now." "Why?" "Because they've damaged the structure. It's dangerous to stay here." "That's a lie," the leader shouted. "These people are trying to scare you." "Mrs. Martha," David said firmly, "trust me. Get to another apartment now." The elderly woman looked between them, confused and frightened. I don't understand what's happening." "What's happening," said a voice behind them, "is that you 2 are causing trouble again." It was Richard emerging from the elevator with 2 security guards. "Richard," Sarah confronted him, "these men are destroying Mrs. Martha's apartment. They're fixing the leaks you caused." "We didn't cause any leaks." "Of course you did. The beggar in your apartment sabotaged the plumbing to study the building's structure." David stepped toward Richard. "You know very well that's a lie." "Do I? Prove it." "I can prove it. These leaks were caused artificially. The holes in the pipes were drilled with a drill bit at strategic points. And who's to say you didn't make the holes? Because I know where all the pipes are without needing to drill anything. An experienced architect doesn't need to destroy to analyze." Richard tensed upon hearing the word architect. "You're no architect, you're a con man." "Yes, I am, and I can prove it." "How?" David pulled a crumpled paper from his pocket. It was the napkin on which he had drawn the floor plan. "This is the basic blueprint of this building. I drew it from memory because I know every detail of the structure." Richard took the paper and examined it. Even crumpled, you could see the drawing was technically perfect, with exact proportions and precise architectural details. Anyone can copy a blueprint. Anyone can copy, but they can't include details that aren't in the official blueprint. "What details?" "Look here," David pointed to a part of the drawing. "This utility room in the basement. It's not on the official blueprint because it was added during construction to solve a space issue." Richard paled. "How do you know that?" "Because I designed this building." A total silence fell over the hallway. That's impossible." "It's not. My name is David Taylor Davis, lead architect for the Acacia Gardens residential project, built between 2018 and 2020. Mrs. Martha gasped. "Acacia Gardens, that's our building's name." "Exactly. But the architect of this building was a rich, successful man." "He was, until I lost everything." Richard was visibly shaken but tried to maintain his composure. "Even if that's true, it changes nothing. You don't live here." "No, but this building is my creation, and I won't let anyone destroy it." No one is destroying anything. Yes, they are. These men soared through 3 support beams on the 6th floor. With the added weight from the water leaks, the structure could give way at any moment. That's a lie. Want to bet your life on it? At that moment, a metallic groan echoed through the building. It was the sound of structure giving way. "Everyone get off the 6th floor now," David shouted. "You're being melodramatic." Crack. A much louder noise reverberated through the walls. Pieces of plaster began to fall from the ceiling. "Get out now!" David pushed Mrs. Martha toward the stairs. "He's right," shouted one of the men doing the maintenance. "We cut too much. The structure is giving way." Richard stood frozen. "This can't be happening. Move!" Sarah pulled him by the arm. Everyone ran for the stairs. Behind them, more sounds of structure breaking. In the lobby, other residents appeared, frightened by the noise. "What's going on?" Mr. George asked. "Structural problem on the 6th floor," David explained. "All residents from those apartments need to get out now." "What do you mean?" Gladys appeared in a bathrobe. "Structural problem?" "Someone compromised the support beams. The structure could collapse." "Someone?" she yelled. "It was you!" "No," Sarah yelled back. "It was Richard. He hired these men to sabotage the building and blame David." Everyone turned to look at Richard, who was leaning against the wall, pale and sweating. That's an absurd accusation." "It's true," said the leader of the men who were doing the sabotage. "He paid us $5,000 to cause trouble and blame the architect." "Shut up!" Richard shouted. "I won't shut up. You said it was just to cause a few leaks. You said nothing about cutting support beams. Now the building could collapse and the blame will be on us too." Mrs. Beatrice, who had come down leaning on her crutches, shook her head. "I knew you were plotting something, Richard." "Mrs. Beatrice, you don't understand." "I do understand. You wanted to get rid of Sarah and David at any cost, even if it put our lives at risk." More sounds of the structure giving way came from above. "Everyone, can we discuss this later?" David interrupted. "Right now we need to evacuate the 6th floor apartments and assess the damage." "And who's going to assess it?" Bill asked. "You." "I am the architect responsible for the project. I know every inch of this structure. But you no longer have a license to practice." "I don't need a license to save lives. I just need knowledge, and I have it." Gladys, who until then had been one of the fiercest opponents, approached him. You really designed our building?" "I did. Every detail, every measurement, every load calculation." "And can you fix it?" "I can assess the damage and say what needs to be done. But I'll need help." "What kind of help?" "First, I need to go into the basement to check if the main structure is compromised. And if it is, then we'll have a much bigger problem." David went down to the basement, accompanied by Sarah, Mr. George, and reluctantly Richard. Using his cell phone flashlight, he examined the main support columns. "The good news is the main structure is intact." "And the bad news?" Sarah asked. "The bad news is they damaged precisely the beams that distribute the weight of the structure. It's like they broke the supporting bones of an arm. The arm is still attached to the body, but it can't bear weight." "What does that mean in practice?" "It means the 6th floor apartments cannot be occupied until we repair the damage, and depending on the weight of the water still leaking in, the situation could get worse." "How much time do we have?" David calculated mentally. "If we stop the leak now, maybe a week. If we don't, maybe a few hours." "How do we stop the leak?" "By shutting off the main water valve for the 6th floor and draining all the accumulated water. And then I need to design a structural reinforcement plan and find engineers willing to carry it out." "How much will that cost?" "At least $50,000. Richard, who had remained silent during the entire inspection, finally spoke. "I don't have that money." "You should have thought of that before hiring saboteurs. I just wanted you all to leave the building. I didn't imagine it would come to this." "Richard," Mr. George stared at him, "you almost caused us to lose our homes. And worse, you almost caused serious accidents. I know I was wrong, but blaming me now is no use. We need to solve this." When they returned to the lobby, a small crowd had gathered. Residents from other floors, curious neighbors, even a fire truck that someone had called. The fire chief approached David. Are you the building's technical supervisor? I'm the architect who designed it. I just did a preliminary inspection. What's the situation? Compromised secondary beams on the 6th floor, main structure intact, but risk of localized collapse if we don't act quickly. Do you recommend evacuation? Of the 6th floor apartments, yes. The rest of the building is safe for now. Do you need a condemnation order? David looked at the residents around him. Everyone was apprehensive, waiting for his answer. No. If we shut off the water main and drain the leak in the next few hours, we can keep it from getting worse. Do you assume technical responsibility? David hesitated. Assuming technical responsibility without a valid license was risky. I do. Sarah touched his arm, worried. She knew what that meant for him. The commander took notes. All right, we'll monitor the situation. If it worsens, we'll have to seal it off. After the firefighters left, David addressed the residents. Folks, I'll be direct with you. We have a serious problem, but it can be fixed. I'm going to need some volunteers to help me. What kind of help? Mrs. Beatrice asked. First, I need someone to help me shut off the main valve on the 6th floor and drain all the accumulated water. I'll help, Mr. George offered. Second, I need to get into every apartment on the 6th floor to assess the damage in detail. The residents are all right here. Gladys pointed to a group of 5 people. We can hand over the keys. Third, I need someone who understands condo administration to figure out how we'll finance the repairs. Silence. I can help with that, said a voice no one expected. It was Sarah. Sarah, you understand administration? Mrs. Beatrice asked. I worked 15 years in a hospital. I know how to handle budgets, suppliers, team coordination. It's not that different from managing a condo. David smiled at her. Perfect. Then let's get started. All through the night they worked. David and Mr. George drained the accumulated water and shut off the valves. Sarah organized a spreadsheet with all the costs involved. The 6th floor residents, initially reluctant, gradually became convinced that David really knew what he was doing. How can you know exactly where all the pipes are without breaking the walls? Asked Mrs. Martha. Because I designed the entire plumbing system. I remember every connection, every branch. And why do you remember all that? Because this building was my last project before everything fell apart in my life. I spent 2 years developing every detail. It was supposed to be my masterpiece. And it was, said Sarah, who approached with the spreadsheet. It's an incredible project. The layout of the spaces, the use of natural light, the ventilation systems. You created something very special. Thank you. That means a lot to me. Around 5 in the morning they had stabilized the situation. The water stopped leaking, the damage was mapped, and the repair plan was ready. Now for the bad news, Sarah announced. The total cost will be $52,000. How are we going to pay for that? Bill asked. Well, she consulted her notes. If we split it among all the apartments, it comes to $3,200 per unit. $3,000? Gladys was shocked. I don't have that kind of money. Neither do I, said Mr. George. Nor does anyone, Mrs. Beatrice added. Hold on, Sarah raised her hand. I'm proposing installments, $200 a month for 15 months. That's still a lot of money. Everyone, David interrupted. Can I make a proposal? They all turned to him. I'll cover the cost of the repairs. What do you mean? Sarah asked, surprised. I'll pay the $52,000. David, you don't have that money. Actually, I do. Everyone was confused. What do you mean? Richard asked. David took a deep breath. When I lost my company, I was forced to sell everything to pay settlements, but I managed to keep a sum in an emergency fund. Money that was set aside for a new life. How much money? $80,000. Enough to start over in another city, far away from all this. And you're going to spend that money to help us? Mrs. Beatrice asked, moved. I am, because you are the first people in 3 years who gave me a chance to be useful again. But David, Sarah protested, that money is your future. My future is here, with these people in this building with you. Gladys, who had been one of the fiercest opponents, began to cry. I was horrible to you. I treated you like trash. I spread lies. You were worried about your safety, I understand. No, I don't understand. I was prejudiced, cruel, unfair. Gladys, we've all made mistakes. What matters is what we do afterward. Richard, who had remained silent throughout the conversation, approached David. I need to apologize. Richard, no, let me speak. I almost caused a tragedy because of my jealousy. Jealousy? Of how Sarah looked at you. With respect, with affection. She never looked at me that way, and it drove me crazy. Richard, you didn't need to create this whole situation. I know I was pathetic, but when I saw that she chose to stay by your side even after losing the apartment, I realized I would never be reciprocated. Sarah approached. Richard, I always made it clear I had no romantic interest. It wasn't about you being rich or poor. It was about character. I know, and my character was shameful. It was. But there's still time to change that. For the rest of the morning, the plans were finalized. David would personally coordinate all the work. Sarah would be appointed the new building manager. Richard resigned from the board president position. The repairs would begin on Monday, but there was still one pending issue. And the eviction order? Sarah asked. Cancelled, said Mr. Bennett, who had been called by Richard. With the change in management and the new facts, there's no longer a legal basis for the action. You mean we can stay? You can. In fact, after everything that's happened, I believe the building will insist that you stay. Gladys stepped forward. I propose that David be appointed the building's permanent technical consultant. Seconded, said Mrs. Beatrice. Me too, added Mr. George. David was moved. You want me to stay? We want you to be part of our community, Mrs. Martha said, for real this time. And Sarah as manager, Bill asked. Approved unanimously, several voices shouted. Sarah and David looked at each other, still not believing the turnaround. There's one thing I still don't understand, Mr. George said. How are you two going to live in the same apartment? Sarah and David blushed. Well, we haven't talked about that yet. I can sleep on the couch, David said quickly. Or, Mrs. Beatrice smiled mischievously, you could resolve that issue in a more permanent way. Mrs. Beatrice, Sarah turned red. What? You're single adults. You like each other. You've been through all this together. What are you waiting for? David took Sarah's hand. Sarah, ever since you took me in that first night, I felt that maybe there was still hope for me. Not just to have a roof, but to be human again. David, you gave me back my dignity. You gave me a chance to be useful again. You showed me that the past doesn't have to define the future. You did the same for me. When I lost my job, I thought my life was over. But you showed me that caring for people is more important than any profession. So, are you two dating or not? Gladys asked impatiently. They laughed. I guess we are, Sarah answered. Since when? Mrs. Beatrice wanted to know. Since I discovered he had a heart bigger than his pride, Sarah looked at David. And ever since I discovered she had the courage to face the whole world for someone she barely knew, he replied. 6 months later, Acacia Gardens was completely renovated. David not only repaired the damage caused by the sabotage, but also took the opportunity to implement improvements he had envisioned in the original project, but couldn't execute at the time due to budget constraints. He installed a rainwater harvesting system, improved the thermal insulation, created a community garden on the rooftop, and transformed an unused area in the basement into a common room. Sarah, as the administrator, managed to reduce the condo fees by 30% through better negotiations with suppliers and service optimization. Their relationship blossomed naturally. David officially moved into Sarah's apartment after she asked him out, to everyone's surprise since she took the initiative. You took way too long to make a move, she said, laughing. I had to take the lead. I was waiting to sort out my professional life first. Your professional life was already sorted. You just didn't know it. And it was. David started receiving job offers from other condominiums. Word spread that there was an architect specializing in building renovations and improvements who charged fair prices and did exceptional work. In no time, he had formed a small construction consulting firm specializing in the restoration of old buildings. "It's like I found my true calling," he told Sarah during a dinner. "Before I built from scratch. Now I fix, improve, revitalize. It's much more rewarding." "And are you earning well?" "Better than before, but mainly, I'm happy." Sarah also found a new job. Mr. Bennett, impressed with her administrative skills, recommended her to manage a private medical clinic. The salary was better than the hospital's, and she could apply all her experience in caring for people. A year later, on a Sunday afternoon, all the residents were gathered in the rooftop community garden for the first anniversary of the Acacia Gardens crisis, as they had come to call the events of that night. "Who would have thought the worst night of our lives would become the best thing that ever happened to us," reflected Mrs. Beatrice. "Speak for yourself," joked Gladys. "I was mortified beyond belief." "But you learned a valuable lesson," Mr. George added. "I did. I learned that you can't judge people by appearances, and that kindness is more important than anything else." Richard, who had become one of David's best friends, raised his glass of juice. "I want to make a toast." "Another one?" Mrs. Martha laughed. "You've already made 5 today." "This one is special. I want to toast to David and Sarah, who taught us that family isn't about blood or money. It's about being there when people need you." "Cheers!" everyone shouted. David stood up. "Actually, I'll take this opportunity to make an announcement." "What announcement?" Sarah asked curiously. "Well," he took a small box out of his pocket. "David!" she screamed. "Sarah Miller." He knelt in the middle of the garden he had designed especially for her, surrounded by all the people who once humiliated them and now loved them sincerely. "Will you marry me?" "Yes!" she screamed, before he even finished the question. And as everyone applauded and cried with emotion, Sarah realized that sometimes life puts us in the most unexpected places to teach us the most important lessons. She had lost a job but gained a calling. She had been humiliated for sheltering a stranger but found the love of her life. She had risked losing her home but built a true family. And David, who thought his life was over when he lost everything, discovered that sometimes you have to lose everything to find what truly matters. 2 years later, on their wedding day, which was held right there on the terrace garden with all the residents present, Mrs. Beatrice gave a speech that summed up the entire journey. "You two have taught us that there are no coincidences in life. David wasn't simply passed out on the sidewalk. Sarah wasn't simply passing by. They were being led to each other. And we all were instruments in this story of love and redemption. And we learned," Gladys added, "that judging people without knowing them is the biggest mistake we can make. We almost missed the chance to know 2 of the best people who have ever come into our lives." The photographer asked the couple to pose for the official photo. Sarah, radiant in her simple dress, and David, elegant in his suit, positioned themselves in the center of the garden. "Wait," shouted Mr. George. "We want to be in the photo too." "Yes," agreed Mrs. Beatrice. "We're all family now." And so, the wedding photo of Sarah and David immortalized not just a couple in love, but an entire community that learned that true wealth isn't in what we possess, but in what we share. 3 years later, when the couple's first child was born, a boy they named Ethan in honor of the power of announcing good news, all the residents took turns caring for the child. "This boy will grow up knowing that family is much more than genetics," Sarah said to David as they watched Mrs. Beatrice teach Ethan to take his first steps in the terrace garden. "He'll grow up knowing that home is where we are accepted and loved, not where we are born," he replied. And when Ethan took his first steps, he went straight into the arms of Gladys, who cried as if he were her own grandson. "See," she said to everyone, "he knows I'm the coolest grandma in the building." "Gladys, you're the only grandma in the building," Mrs. Martha laughed. "Exactly, that's why I'm the best." End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this story and where you're watching from. Do you believe Sarah and David made the right decisions in facing prejudice and fighting for justice? Leave your honest opinion in the comments. We love getting to know our listeners and hearing what you think about these stories of overcoming and love. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories like this one.